Today, the 1 million vacant homes question. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one that's post covering finance and problem news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, the conversation had an interesting article recently relating to the recent release of the 2021 Census data, which revealed a shocking 1 million homes were unoccupied. This statistic, they say, sent housing commentators, government agencies and policymakers into a spin. At a time of significant housing shortages, this extra million homes would surely make a big difference. They could provide housing for some homeless, ease the rental affordability crisis and get first homeowners into their first home. There's been a great deal of speculation about how this has happened. Has it been caused by overseas millionaires buying up housing and leaving it in an empty state? Is it Airbnb taking up homes that could be used for families? Or are cashed up Gen-Xers double consuming by living in one house while renovating another? So why were 1,043,776 dwellings empty on census night? Well, in fact, we've got a pretty good idea, they said, of what's going on. First, it's not a new phenomenon. When we compare 2021 with previous censuses, a slightly smaller percentage of our private dwelling stock was classified as unoccupied, just under 10%, compared with nearly 11% at the previous census in 2016. Since the release of the data, many journalists have pointed to this startling number of empty homes, portraying them as abandoned or left empty. There is almost certainly a much more ordinary and less startling story to tell, they said. We suspect there are three main explanations. A big part of the story is how the ABS determines whether a dwelling is occupied or not. In short, it does its best by using a variety of methods, but for the majority of dwellings, occupancy is determined by the returned census form. If a form has not been returned and the ABS had no further information, the dwelling was often deemed to be unoccupied. That's important to our interpretation of the empty home story. At any one time, lots of things are going on in the housing market, and most of it is a long way from abandoned or empty. For example, 647,000 dwellings were sold in 2021. This means many thousands of dwellings were unoccupied on census night because they were up for sale or awaiting transfer. The second, and perhaps most important contributor to the empty house stories, is holiday homes. Estimates vary, but we know around 2 million Australians own one or more properties other than their own home. It's estimated up to 346,581 of those properties may be listed on just one rental platform, Airbnb. It's part of the census designed to pick a night of the year when the most Australians were at home. So if you think back to Tuesday, August the 10th, 2021, it was a Tuesday night in midwinter. So many of Australia's holiday homes would have been empty and counted as unoccupied. And so where are those unoccupied dwellings located? Well, if we map the distribution of unoccupied dwellings across Australia, two things stand out. First, unoccupied dwellings tend to be concentrated in sea change and inner city holiday spots, such as Victor Harbour in South Australia, Lorne in Victoria, and Bateman's Bay in New South Wales. This reinforces the holiday homes explanation. It's also striking how few unoccupied homes are in the major cities. Sydney is a great example. Here's a map that shows a very uniform absence of unused housing across the whole metropolitan area. So, should we worry about the million unoccupied homes? Well, yes and no, they say. An unknown proportion of that million is not empty, just assumed to be vacant because a census form was not returned. And we should regard this as a systemic error in the counting process. No doubt the ABS will be aiming to reduce this in future censuses. Some of that million are genuinely vacant due to the way the housing market works. This includes, for example, the sales process and the need for vacant possession. Yet, even if there are substantially fewer than 1 million vacant dwellings, the reality is there are too many ways homes in Australia can be left unoccupied for weeks, months and years, and it's costing us all. Those who are homeless are paying the highest price, but the rest of us feel the pain through higher rents, increased rates of pay for infrastructure constructed for housing that isn't occupied, and greater difficulties in getting into the housing market. So we need to find ways to ensure houses are full of people, not left empty, as owners wait for investment opportunities to mature or for absentee owners to go on holiday. We know that there are solutions out there, removing caps on council rates and treating short-term rentals as commercial properties essential to the tourist industry are just two ways we could get better occupancy of our stock. We just need to find the will to implement them. Let me add a couple of points. The first is the thing that they've missed is the extra 250,000 properties under construction currently. They, of course, will be vacant because they're not complete. And they are very much concentrated in our major cities. Those are not in any of the statistics. Secondly, we do know that in our major urban centres, for example in around Docklands, there are many examples of vacant properties that have never been occupied. And that is where a number of overseas investors are holding them vacant and empty, waiting for capital appreciation. That needs to be fixed, and the best way to do that would be to look at the tax system. The third point is that I agree there are a number of issues about the ABS census methodology, but we still have a large number of properties underutilised. And that is really a very critical issue, bearing in mind the lack of supply that we've got at the moment in some areas, and also the fact that the number of people wanting to get into property will increase as migration increases. So my belief is that this vacant property issue needs to be addressed at both a federal and state level. But I have to tell you, there appears to be very little appetite to even want to turn the stone over and see what's going on underneath. And that in itself is a problem, but it may possibly have something to do with the fact that politicians tend to have multiple properties, perhaps including some vacant ones. Indeed, as The Guardian reported last week, federal MPs and senators have impressive property portfolios, owning or having an interest in almost 2 properties each on average. Of our 151 MPs and 76 senators, 38 have property in the nation's capital, Canberra, or in nearby Queanbeyan, for which they are entitled to claim a $299 a night travel allowance for parliamentary business. A survey of the Registry of Interest revealed MPs and senators own 237 houses or apartments, including their primary and Canberra residences, and have interest in 210 other properties, including holiday homes, investment properties, or agricultural land. These are often owned with spouses or partners. In fact, The Guardian revealed quite a wide range of interests, including rare metals, racehorses, and cryptocurrencies owned by our elected leaders. Among the biggest property owners in Parliament are the Shadow Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews, who owns her own residence in Clear Island Waters in Queensland and 6 investment properties. The Leader of the House, Tony Burke, who resides in Punchbowl in New South Wales and Belcon in the ACT, and also has 4 investment properties. The Labour MP Louise Miller-Frost, who owns a residence in Cumberland Park, South Australia, and 4 investment properties, and the Nationals MP Andrew Wilcox, who owns his residence in Bowen, and 5 investment properties in Brisbane and Townsville. Under parliamentary expenses rules, MPs and senators are able to claim $299 a night to stay in Canberra to attend an official business, including parliamentary sittings. The allowance is payable regardless of whether MPs and senators stay in a property they own. In the last term of Parliament, the allowance was worth $291 a night. Government MPs with Canberra or Queanbeyan residences include Burke, the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, the Treasurer Jim Chalmers, the Speaker Milton Dick, the Pacific Minister Pat Conroy, the Resources Minister Madeleine King, the Environment Minister Daniel Plebislik, and the Senator Leader Penny Wong. On the Coalition side, the Nationals Leader David Littleproud, the Shadow Climate Change Minister Ted O'Brien, the Shadow Attorney General Michaela Cash, and Senator Matt Canavan have a second residence in Canberra. And some of the Parliament's new faces are among its biggest property owners. The independent MP Sophie Scamps declared a family home in Avalon Beach, a farm in Wee Jesper, and 3 investment properties, and the Labour MP Michelle Adana-Raj declared 4 investment properties as residential investment joint holding with spouse. The Coalition MPs Gavin Pearce, Nola Marino and Colin Boyce declared interest in 5 or more properties each, although several of those were leases on agricultural land. And the Greens MPs Stephen Bates and Max Chandler-Mather and Senators Dorina Cox, Jordan Steele-John and David Shoebridge were among the politicians to declare no property ownership. However, Shoebridge declared 3 mortgages on investment properties held by spouse in his liability section. And Bates, a former retail worker elected to the seat of Brisbane, told the ABC in May, despite the insane base salary of $211,000 for MPs, he intended to work at least 3 more shifts after his election to make rent. The high proportion of renters in Bates and Chandler-Mather's seats has been credited for their victory. Chandler-Mather, the Greens housing spokesman, has called for a 2-year rent freeze as the minor party courts people facing soaring rents. And Greens party mates Nick McKim, Maureen Fakhri and Elizabeth Watson-Brown were among those to declare ownership of multiple properties in addition to their primary residences. So some of them will have vacant properties, I'm pretty sure. Which begs the question, is that one reason why nobody wants to open the can of worms with regard to vacant properties across Australia? We'll see. Now, if you're buying your home in Sydney's contentious market, you don't need to stand alone. This is the time you need to have Edwin Almeida from Ribbon Property Consultants standing alongside you. Buying a property is both challenging and adversarial. The vendor has a professional on their side. Emotions run high, price discovery and price transparency are hard to find, and then there's the wasted time and financial investments that you make. Edwin understands your needs, so why not engage a licensed professional to stand alongside you? With RPC, you know you have experience, knowledge, and master negotiators looking after your best interests. So shoot Ribbon an email at info@ribbonproperty.com.au, and if you use the promo code DFAWTW/Martin, you can get a 10% discount offer. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.